All right, so we understand what is LSMW, and we also understand why is LSMW used. So going forward, we're going to explore how we're going to use LSMW. Now, before I go into the details of LSMW, I want to give you a very brief but high-level picture of LSMW. So let's get started with a very high-level picture of LSMW. Let me quickly show you a screenshot that I've taken from SAP of one of the LSMW pricing that I've done in one of my projects. As you can see, there are so many steps here, right? So let's say count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So around 14 or 15 steps, right? Now, you can just go about doing them blindly without really having to worry too much. But I don't really want you to do it that way. Here is the reason why. Once you get rolling, if something goes wrong, let's say in this step, if something goes wrong, right? If you really don't know what's happening at a high level, fixing that is going to be very difficult. So let's understand LSMW at a very high level. All right. Okay. So LSMW is basically just 4 or 5 steps. The 14 or 15 steps that we have seen is not really 14. I would rather want to think of it of those 14 steps, right? From a conceptual level into really 4 major chunks or sections, right? The first section is data sources. Now, remember, I'm not going to go in the same sequence as those steps are. That we're going to look at a more detailed picture separately on a different level. But this is the entire LSMW at a very high level. I'm dividing that into 3 or 4 different sections, right? The first section is the data source. Is this happening in SAP? No, this is completely outside of SAP. So what kind of data sources are supported by SAP? Now, you can have an Oracle system like we have seen in our first section. You can have a CRM system like we have seen in the second example. You can have any kind of database, right? Or you can have Excel, or you can really have any kind of data source that you want. You could even have a legacy system like a mainframe. So identifying the data source is the first step in LSMW. Again, at a very high level. I'm not talking about the details yet. So the first step in doing your LSMW is identifying data at a very high level. What's your data source? Where are you going to bring the data into SAP? So the first step is identify the data source. The next step is flat files. Okay, now irrespective of your data source, if you remember one of our previous sessions, I said it doesn't matter what your data source is, LSMW can pull any kind of data into SAP. So how does LSMW do it? Well, LSMW cheats a little bit here. Although all kinds of data sources are supported, they are not really supported in their native format, meaning if there's an Oracle data source, SAP cannot directly pull the data out of Oracle or out of CRM. Like we have seen in the second example, you have asked your CRM developer to give you a dump of all those 100 customers in a flat file. Right? So similarly, irrespective of what your data source is, you have got to ask these guys, the owners of these data sources, to export, right? To export the data into flat files for you. So what's a flat file? A flat file is a very simple data format that you can open in simple application like a notepad or a text pad. and you can just read them. They're not binary format. They're just plain text files. For example, a customer master could be something like this. The first line could be the customer number 1001, and then followed by the customer name, Walmart, and then followed by his address, blah, blah, blah. And the second line could be 1002. This could be Target Inc. and the address, so on and so forth. Like any other text file. Okay, that's what I mean by flat files. There are a few formats to these flat files, and we'll talk about those formats when we get into the details. The key here is to understand that irrespective of your data source, make sure that there's somebody who can export this data into flat files for you. That's step number 2. Step number 3 is your LSMW. Well, these 14 steps, right? Step number 3 is LSMW. And step number 4 is your target, which is SAP. So at the end of the day, what we're essentially doing is bringing this data into SAP, right? And in order to bring this data into SAP, LSMW provides a bunch of methods. These methods are also called import methods. Import methods. So what are the import methods that are supported by LSMW? Well, the first and the most important one is what's called as a recording. So it's quite literally a recording of a transaction. It could be a customer master, or it could be a sales order, or any transaction you like. You just record the transaction and SAP plays it back again and again and again. It's like you teach a parrot something and then it says the same word again and again and again. You just change the values. For example, the first customer is Target, the second customer is Walmart, the third customer is Sam's Club. But the process to create these customers is recorded once, and you feed the data. This data is fed to it again and again and again. Right? This is the most commonly used method of importing data into LSMW. There are other methods like BAPI, Business Application Programming Interface, or IDOC, Intermediate Documents, or Standard Recordings. But we're not going to talk about these methods, but rather we're going to focus more on the first method, which is the recording. Now, it doesn't really matter what kind of import method is used, at least for the purposes of learning LSMW. Each method has got its own advantages. For example, if you're looking at speed, for example, if you have a ton of data and you really want the data to be imported very quickly, BAPI is really a nice, fast method, whereas a recording or an IDOC is not suitable. Because recordings on IDOCs are slow. A BAPI is really fast. So the import method that you choose, it will really depend on the situation. All right. But like I said, in 99% of the cases, you can just do away with the recording and be done with LSMW. All right. Now the rest of the steps are really much smaller steps in the sequence of LSMW. The 14 steps that I was talking about are really some of the subsequent steps that will really enable you to collect all this data, store it in an internal structure, and then use these methods, create hooks, and then import the data into SAP. Now, this is a high-level overview of LSMW, really high level, just to let you understand what's really happening end to end. And another thing that I want you to take away from here is initially when I was learning LSMW, I was so focused on these 14 steps and all these different inner workings of LSMW that after some time I kind of started feeling some void, and what I later realized after I have done a couple of cycles is the actual 14 steps are very mechanical. If you really do those steps a couple of times, maybe 3 times, you'll have a fair idea on how to do these steps. And they don't really bother you so much as long as you understand the high level picture. More importantly, you'll be more worried about how you get the data right and what kind of data sources should be picked up, and where you really get your data from, and is it in the right format, how the data is being cleansed, so on and so forth. Uh, that could become an area of concern for you as a functional consultant who's responsible for migrating data, let's say customer or material. uh, you'll be spending almost 20 to 30% of your energy in making sure that your data sources are right, and you have the data in the right format, and all of the data is cleansed, removed for duplicates, so on and so forth. um, Another thing I want to mention when we talk about data sources is sometimes it's not just one data source. I'll give you an example of an LSMW that I've done for a customer master in one of my projects. And the data source was really 2 or 3 different systems for customer master. Let me show you how it was. There was a legacy system that held the customer master, right? All the customers were here, and it was an Oracle based system. So that was where we took the customer data from, and then we had to run this legacy data through the USPS system, which is the US Postal Service, which had a way to standardize all the addresses. So our client said, the data is really not in the right format in our legacy system, so we want to really standardize these addresses. So we ran this through USPS, which was meant for address standardization. And then we ran this, or rather clubbed this data through another system called, it doesn't matter what the name is, but it's some kind of a credit rating system. Credit rating system. So you give any name, let's say you want to talk about a customer, say Walmart, what's its credit rating, how much credit can be given, what's its credit worthiness is determined by this third-party credit rating system. So in a sense, my customer data for this case is a combination of the legacy customer data plus data from USPS for address standardization plus data from credit rating system that gives the credit worthiness of the customer, which is used for the risk management and credit management. All put together is my customer data. As you can see, it's not very straightforward, right? So as a functional consultant, you would have to spend a considerable amount of time in understanding, which chunks of your data lies where, and how to effectively, combine them, or how to effectively run through each of these different data sets in order to achieve the final clear data set that you want to get into SAP. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to learn all these different things. No, definitely not. This is not your job. You don't have to worry about how to extract data from here or here or here. It's the duty of the respective teams. For example, the legacy team will be responsible for giving you this data. There is another team that can run this by USPS for other standardization. There is another team that can combine the data for the customer master with the credit rating system, and then finally give you the Excel or the flat file that you need as customer data into SAP.